let's talk about how you can actually improve your physique. Firstly, if you are in puberty or if you're just under 18 in general, you should be eating as much raw animal foods as possible. So this is raw meat, raw organs, raw eggs, raw milk if you have access to it, specifically raw milk because you'll get access to growth hormones and it could actually increase your height and your frame, which if you don't know, face height and frame are like pretty much the most important things, right? And building muscle and building your physique, as in muscle tissue, is just a way of prodding your natural frame. But you'll see there are actually other ways to do it as well. But in general, if you're under 18, you should be eating as much raw. You should still be doing this after 18, but especially under 18, you should be eating as much raw animal foods as possible, especially raw milk. And this will basically max out your genetic potential in terms of height and frame. So that's the first part, right? You should, but if you're post 18 and you're not in puberty anymore, you should still be doing this, but it's not going to have that much of an effect on your skeletal structure. So that's out of the way, right? Let's get into how to actually improve your physique. First one, this is a bit unconventional and you might not have thought of it, but it's actually to fraud your height because when people think of physique, they don't really think of height, right? People think of physique, they usually think about just muscle tissue, but in general, right, your whole body, right, your height and frame and muscle, that all encompasses your physique. And most people would actually get a way bigger benefit from simply frauding their height than from a few extra years of gym training. So here's how you do it really quickly, right? This is a super fast, no BS height frauding guide where most people can gain up to 2 inches of their current height. So first step is basically just picking a sneaker or shoe that adds more height, at least than your current one. So if you go on celebheights.com to the sneaker section, they actually have it all measured out for you. So you can look at these, right? Like a lot of Air Maxes have 1.5 inches to your barefoot height, right? This is added to your barefoot height. Whereas some of the shoes, maybe you might be wearing some of these, they only add less than 1 inch to your barefoot height. So this depends on what shoe you're currently wearing and how much height you can gain. But most people, if you just pick an Air Max or like Air Forces, they can add half to 1 inch of height. And if you want to, you could get elevator shoes, but with elevator shoes, sometimes it can look pretty obvious, especially if someone else can recognize the brand of the shoe. However, with these shoes, right, you have plausible deniability where people can't call you out for height frauding because they're just normal shoes that people wear and they just happen to have a little bit more height than normal. So if you just pick one of these, you can easily gain around half, maybe up to 1 inch to your current height. Unless you're already wearing these, then you're already height frauding to a small extent. Next step is simply to get a height insole and just stuff that into your shoe, right? What you do is you take, let's say you have Air Max 95, it adds 1.5 inches to your barefoot height. You take the inner insole layer, you peel it off, and then you put your height insole in there, and then you put the top layer back in. Now with this, you can gain 1 to 1.5 inch of height. And if you actually just add that up, right? If you put, let's say, just 1 inch and you put that into the Air Max 95, you're gaining 1.5 inches to your barefoot height from the shoe itself, and then another 1 inch from the height insole. So that's going to be 2.5 inches to your barefoot height. And that would actually be really comparable to most elevator shoes, right? At least the more, what's the word? Conspicuous? The less obvious one, I should say. So that's basic two-step plan. And if you just do that, right, if you want to, you can go even further and add 1.5 inches from the height insoles if you can walk in it. And that's going to add 3 inches to your barefoot height. And if you just do that, you can gain up to 2 inches to your current height, right? You can height fraud because let's say you are 5'11" barefoot and then you add 2.5 inches to your barefoot height. You would be 6'1.5" with shoes. And if you're 6'1.5" with shoes, you can easily claim 6'1". So that's just a really quick height frauding guide. And for most people, if you height fraud, that's actually going to do a lot more for your physique than few extra years of gym training, right? Because height is going to make a pretty big difference. And you might be thinking, right, isn't that only for short people? Don't short people benefit the most? You might be thinking, since your average height, you shouldn't do this. But if your average height, you actually benefit the most from height frauding. Because let's say this is the distribution of height, right? That's a terrible curve. Let's say you have a bell curve of the distribution of height. And let's say the average Gen Z height is 5'10", 5'11", right? Contrary to what some people might say, the average Gen Z height is not 6'2" or 6'3", right? It's around 5'11", maybe around 5'10", depending on what country you're in. But most Western countries, probably 5'10" to 5'11". Now, if you are a manlet, let's say you're over here and you're 5'5". If you just add 2 inches of height, yeah, that's going to improve, but the improvement is not going to be that much. However, if you're 5'11" and you add 2 inches of height and you go to 6'1", that's going to actually be a huge improvement. You're going to height mog way more people from that same 2-inch improvement because you are at the average. Because when you're around average, you actually get the most benefit, the most increases in height mogging when you increase your height. So no, height frauding is not just for short people. Average height people actually would benefit the most from height frauding, which is good news if you're in that category like I am. So that's the first step, right? And you can kind of see we're checking off the height part with, this whole improving your physique thing with height frauding. Now the next step is to fraud your frame, right? You can kind of see a pattern here where we haven't even got to building muscle yet. We were just talking about frauding methods of height and frame. And because if you don't know, right, gym training can actually shorten your lifespan and cause you to age, right? If you know about raw animal foods, you probably know that training in the gym could actually shorten your lifespan. So when you use frauding methods like height frauding and frame frauding, you're getting all the benefits, if not more benefits, of gym training, at least when you're in clothes, but you're not damaging and stressing your body and causing yourself to age. So it's kind of, a slick move you can do right here. So how to frame fraud? If you want to frame fraud, right? Basically just wearing shoulder pads. Now, I understand if you don't want to do this because this looks extremely autistic, and if you get caught, then if you get caught wearing this, then it's kind of over for you. But I specifically included this part because there is a specific brand of Korea t-shirt fashion brand, which they make t-shirts with shoulder pads built in for men, and they're very inconspicuous, right? They're built in. So when you take off the shirt, it comes off as well, and it'll add a few extra inches to your bideltoid. But thing is, like, I can't really find the brand right now. Like, I found it earlier, but I'm trying to find it again. And if I do find it, I'll let you know for the people inside my Discord channel as well. But yeah, you're probably not going to be wearing this. You're probably going to be wearing one of those t-shirts with a shoulder pad built in. And that actually brings me to the next part, which is to join my Discord server, right? Join my private Discord server. I'll let you know about when I actually find the brand again, and I'll send it to you. And yeah, I'll be discussing all kinds of stuff like advanced training methods, how to actually make your physique look good and not be a gym cell, raw meat diet if you're into that. Which if you're not, then you probably think it's a bit weird, but if you're tapped in, then you will know that eating raw meat is actually really good for you, and the gym will shorten your lifespan if you don't do it correctly. So yeah, that's the third point. Join my Discord server. Now, the next part is specifically with clothing choices and illusion strategies. And I'm not going to go into too much autistic detail on this, but firstly, when it comes to hairstyle, having less volume on your head is going to make your physique look bigger, because when you have a bunch of hair like this guy, it basically creates the illusion of a bigger head, right? It makes your head look bigger, and in turn, it makes your shoulders and your body look more narrow and smaller. That's why when you see someone with a huge afro, they tend to look more skinny, right? At least in terms of their body, because of the visual effect. Now, for the opposite of this is to keep your hair as short as possible, especially the sides, and that will basically maximize how wide you look. but I wouldn't recommend this for everyone. I would only recommend this if you have extremely narrow clavicles and you just want to make yourself look wider, because again, short hair, it's not masculine. Short hair is actually the opposite of being masculine. I'm not going to say too much stuff about this, but in general, right, if you actually care about looks, you should have longer hair. But if you want to look wider, just know that having shorter hair on the sides is going to make you look wider and going to improve how your physique looks. The second thing is the clothing you wear, right? If you have a small frame, right, narrow clavicles and just small frame in general, you shouldn't be wearing, especially if you don't have a lot of muscle, you shouldn't be wearing a lot of these compression type shirts, because when you wear these, it's basically going to make you look like a twink, right? Kind of like this guy. But if you have a small frame, or if you just want to look bigger in general, you can consider wearing a larger, more oversized shirt like this guy. But again, right, if you shave your head and wear this kind of stuff, you're gonna sort of step into gym cell territory. So this is just few principles you should know when you're deciding on your illusion strategies, right? Don't go all the way to the extreme and shave your head off because you're just going to be a gym cell. But just know that having a lot of volume on your hair is going to make your physique look smaller. And the same thing with compression, right? Just you have to find the right balance for yourself. And lastly, right, we've covered the frauding methods and the illusion strategies and the nutrition. Now we can actually get into the actual training and building muscle, right? This is how to actually, build muscle to improve your physique. But just know that I do think that frauding your height is actually going to benefit you way more. It's a super underrated way of improving your physique, because when you're wearing clothes, the muscle, it's not going to make a huge amount of difference. You should still do it because you'll still get some benefit from it. There's this idea in like the online communities that gym is cope, but that only applies when you look at the extremes, right? Obviously, if you have a wide frame and you're extremely good looking, then yeah, you don't need to go to the gym. Likewise, if you have a terrible frame and you're kind of deformed, then the gym is not going to save you. But most of us, we're not in those extremes. Most of us were in the middle of the bell curve. And for most of us, we can actually benefit from training in the gym if we do it correctly. So let's talk about how to do that. Firstly, you should be doing science-based training, right? The 2025 science-based training, not the Mike Isertel big stretch type training. And I still see people like this in my comment sections about developing the core muscles and you should do the power lifts and the squat and deadlifts. But again, that's retarded, right? If you're like this, then don't join my Discord server, because I'm just going to kick you out when you join. So when it comes to training, really, you do not need to train legs that much. Unless you have really tiny and skinny legs that make you look terrible, you don't need to train legs at all. Especially if you're like me, because a lot of East Asians, not saying all of us, but a lot of us just have like huge quads by default, like without ever stepping foot in the gym. And if you actually think about it, the sexual dimorphism differences between male and female, you would know that men naturally have more mass in their upper bodies and women naturally have more mass in their lower bodies. So if you want to train in a way that accentuates the sexual dimorphism, then as a male, you would prioritize your body way more than your lower body, right? It should not be a 50-50 split of upper and lower. It should be more like 2-to-1 upper lower if you want to accentuate this difference. And really, if your legs are not tiny and you don't care about legs, you don't have to train it at all. Right? The most important muscle groups, firstly, the shoulders, right? Because that's what actually gonna improve your frame, right? It's actually gonna improve your frame. And arms, because that's the part that you can actually see in your day-to-day. More specifically, the biceps. You should prioritize the biceps over the triceps. And also the abs, which nowadays is pretty underrated, but obviously if you train your abs, it's going to make the muscle bigger and it's going to make it more visible at higher body fat percentages. And abs, it's just a pretty underrated muscle group in general as of right now, but it's probably the most aesthetic muscle group you can develop. And the way I would recommend doing this is to just get on a decline bench and hold a dumbbell and just get really strong at decline crunches. Next is back, because you know about the V taper, you know about the V shape. I don't need to go into too much detail on that, right? The V shape for males is like the hourglass for females. And the thing with chest, I don't think chest is actually that good for looking aesthetic, because when you have a big chest, it can actually make your shoulders look smaller. And especially for how most people bench press, they do a big arch, which generally develops the lower chest a lot more. If you are going to train chest, prioritize on the upper chest. And the way you do that is through shoulder flexion. So you can do a lot of low to high cable flies. You can do incline press with a narrow grip. But generally, you should be prioritizing your overhead presses over bench presses if you want to do bench presses at all. And for neck and traps, this depends on your phenotype, because if you train your neck and traps too much, you can easily look like a gym cell. You can easily step into like ogre category. And honestly, this just depends on how you want to look, right? You should be looking in the mirror to determine your muscular weaknesses. And even if you develop your neck and traps too much, all you have to do is stop training it and just let it atrophy naturally. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. Unless you have really skinny and long neck, then I wouldn't really worry about it too much. And in terms of training style, again, like I mentioned earlier, you should be doing a science-based training routine and training the priority muscles 3 times a week, because 3 times a week is going to give you the greatest weekly net stimulus. You can see from the weekly net stimulus calculator over here that if you train one set 3 times a week, that's 2.65 arbitrary units, whereas 3 sets 2 times a week actually gives you less gains than that, because frequency is going to be king for actually making gains, according to modern science-based research. And 3 sets 3 times a week is going to give you the max gains, but you have to be a lot more careful with recovery. So that in general is how you're going to actually improve your physique in non-cope methods. Obviously, if you have a super small frame, then this is not going to help you that much. But most of us, we're not in these extremes. Most of us are in the middle, and we would all benefit greatly from using these methods. Again, join my private Discord server, link in the description. Goodbye.